how do you use AI on the front lines in order to compact or eliminate those problems altogether, right? So you think about the biggest problems and the easiest solutions to implement to get the biggest return on investment as quickly as possible from that type of implementation. And so sales is a huge one, and everyone's in sales, right? Everyone's selling their company. And the second thing is sales is about relationships. AI will never replace that, right? But if you were to look at the amount of time your sales team is actually spending on relationships, you realize that the amount of admin work they are doing in order to maintain those relationships is far outweighing the actual time that they're in front of a client or a prospect. And that's where we really dive in to say, imagine if your sales team wasn't sitting in their office for 6 hours a day, following up with leads, entering the CRM, learning about the person they're about to go play golf with, right? Like, imagine if we were to compact that so that 6 hours a day, they're not in the office, they're actually out doing the things that move the needle that they are very good at, right? And that's really when we look at those departments, we're not trying to eliminate the relationships. What we're trying to do is to say, what is the zone of genius for that person, right? A good salesperson, their genius is talking face to face and closing the deal. Depending on the business, that might be a little different, right? Their zone of genius is not filling out Salesforce, right? Their zone of genius is not researching a prospect company to see if it's worth the time for a meeting. And that's what we attack, and that's what we can compress really in an incredible way using the tools and AI in general.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to our next and very special episode of CardCast. We figured that really we cannot be talking about leadership, execution, strategy, anything in business without mentioning AI at least once. And in the card deck, there are 3 cards that are talking about AI. One is the mindset card, one is sort of the value of AI, the third one is about how to actually get started. And we are lucky enough to have the perfect guest to discuss all 3 of them at once. So you're getting 3 cards in one episode, and you're getting Carter Jensen from the Uncommon Business joining us today. Thank you very much for coming and welcome. And please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yes, amazing. Well, thank you so much for the kind intro. Yeah, my name is Carter Jensen. I am the VP of product here at the Uncommon Business. And we are a young but fast-moving company that really focuses on empowering business leaders of all types and companies of all sizes to bring AI into their organization, into their life in new and differentiated ways. So we're relatively new on the journey. We have been in business for about 18 months. But like anything in AI, as both of you know, it's been a fast-moving business. We just hired our 18th employee actually after 18 months. So we are very excited to see the growth, and we help new businesses every day. So it's great to be here. Thank you again.
Yeah, and before we jump into the conversation, I would like to add, and for disclosure, one of the reasons why we know each other is because I am a happy customer of yours.
A star student, I would say, Milan.
No, I can think of a couple names in the community that are way beyond where I ever aspired to be. But that's how we met. I have a first-hand experience with your products and with your teachings. And as I said, very, very happy with the outcome. And hopefully we can share some of that wisdom today with our listeners here.
That sounds great. I love it.
So Carter, AI came from nowhere. Well, it didn't, but it felt like it came from nowhere and took over the world. And there's probably a lot of CEOs out there that are sort of asking themselves the question, well, how can I leverage AI? How can I sort of use it in a way that just doesn't burn time and attention and resource to actually improve my business? Because if you spend any time on LinkedIn these days, you will just see a torrent of AI slop that is coming at you. So I'm a bit of a cynic about AI, and I'll tell you my experience a little bit later on. But what would you say to a CEO that is looking at all of this stuff, thinking, how can I use this? What would you say to them?
Yeah, one of my previous roles, and I think this is going to come up a lot in our conversation, I led AI basically acceleration at a Fortune 100 company. And to say that I made a big jump to come into a startup is an understatement, right? But there's a reality there, and there's a kind of some magic there as well. But today, and even in my previous role working with our C-suite, we heard that a lot, right? Of there's a lot of hype. I don't see any return on investment. Like we've done all these programs, we've done all these things. And I think, 9 times out of 10, when I hear that, usually they're taking the wrong approach. And we can dive further into that, Jed, in terms of how they're implementing it, how they're empowering their teams, et cetera. But I would say, I don't want to be too cliche about it, but when we look at massive adoption of other pieces of technology, this is on that same path, right? So, whether it's email, whether it's the internet, whether it's the new kind of SaaS platforms that everyone runs on these days, those all had adoption curves as well. And eventually they became mainstream. The AI adoption curve is absolutely massive. And we see a huge difference between CEOs, like you speak of, Jed, who are full in and see the value, and those who don't, right? And they're two very different camps. And we work with them every day. And so I would say one of the biggest things that we always tell CEOs is, how are you empowering everyone on the front lines? We talk about everyone with a laptop to use AI in their day-to-day task. And that's very different than, hiring some fancy CTO or buying some really high value platform. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes. So it is here, it is coming quickly. And you fall into two sides of the camp regardless of where you are.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I know that there's that old saying, a rising tide, floats all ships.
Correct.
So if everyone adopts AI, then nothing's really changed. And all that's happened is everyone has just moved up together. So there is a very, very short window of opportunity where you can be that ship that rises first.
Correct.
But whether you go back to re-engineering, digital transformation. What was the one after that? Oh, blockchain. Yeah.
Yes.
You have all these
exactly.
all these hypes that came along.
Don't forget virtual reality, Jed. Don't forget virtual reality.
Well, that didn't last long at all, really, did it? Yeah. But with all these hype cycles, that's ultimately don't really make that much difference. And I think AI is different. AI is different. But
Correct.
all we're going to see is a general raising of ability and throughput. Milan, jump in.
That's
I know you got
interesting.
something to
That's
say.
interesting, Jed, because you're saying that it's different from the position of self-proclaimed skeptic. So please go.
Oh, look, I mean, my skepticism really comes back to about three and a half years ago. I went deep into AI, and I was right at the forefront. And I know AI has been around forever, but this latest wave, the new OpenAI, when they released their models and their APIs, and it was incredibly useful. But I almost saw a degradation over time of what the results it gave, and I guess adding to that the mass adoption, where everyone thought that they were going to save their businesses by just using ChatGPT, and they're not going to save their businesses just using ChatGPT unless they've got a whole other lot of things in place as well. So I just saw this torrent of stuff that was clearly AI generated, just flooding the world. And I thought, okay, hang on a second, I need to take a different approach here. So I backed right away. And I started positioning myself as the coach that doesn't use AI. And I do use AI, but I don't use AI for anything forward-facing, anything front-facing. So I have all my bots and everything else and my agents working in the background, but nothing that I produce from a content perspective is AI generated. I might use an AI agent to edit my videos, and I might use AI agents to straighten up my eyeballs so it looks like I'm staring straight at the camera. But I don't use it to generate LinkedIn posts. I don't use it to write articles. I don't use it to write books. So I've gone from being early adopter to skeptic, and now just using it in the background for things that I know it is really good at. And I'm going to stop now because I'm probably rambling.
Well, Jed, it's a great approach, and the story arc is not uncommon, right? And
Yeah.
I think that one of the big things, and you highlighted it really well, right? When, especially 3 years ago, the ChatGPT moment, you see a lot of people, really, we call them offloaders, right? We call them AI offloaders, people who type in, write me a great LinkedIn post, it puts some garbage out, they copy paste, they post it, and that's the LinkedIn world filling with garbage. There's also another effect of that kind of approach as well, where we see a lot of people, especially executives. I have the story of an old boss of mine when I was first showing him ChatGPT. He typed in, tell me a joke and told him a joke. And then he said, tell me a joke in a pirate voice. And then he laughed and shut his laptop and walked away. And that was the extent of it, right? Of, not actually truly understanding the power of what that is. And so I think what you saw is yes, that external facing garbage flow in because people were just posting whatever came out of it because they thought it was done, it was good. And then I think you also saw, to your first question, Jed, CEOs who did 2 or 3 types of things and shrugged it off and said, yeah, that's kind of cool. Like, I don't really get the return on that investment. Like, it's a fancy calculator that can write some emails. I don't understand further than that. But I'd be curious too, now that you're seeing the delineation between the two, is it true morals that are, is this idea that you've put a line in the sand that says, I'm not going to do external facing? Or do you still think it is lacking the ability to create external facing content that you're publishing?
It can absolutely create external content, but I wouldn't publish it because you can almost immediately tell when something is written by AI.
Sure.
There are structures that you recognize immediately. It's not a blah blah blah. It's a real blah 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 blah.
Yep.
And
the M
is that familiar?
dashes,
Is that familiar? Yeah, M dashes.
yep.
The emojis, and so for me, it's a question of trust and authenticity. If I see someone is publishing something that is clearly AI generated, my opinion of them has just gone down a whole lot, and I don't want it to happen with what I push out there. So it is so obvious when AI is being used in that way. I don't know, it just devalues a lot of what people are doing. It just devalues it.
Yeah, no, I 100% hear you on that. I think I would also challenge, we're going deep into the debate early on here, Jed. I would also challenge, you're in a very specific industry too,
Yeah.
right? Where your content is your IP, is your work. And I totally see that, right? I think if you'd look at the majority of other industries who, let's say you are a mid-sized CPG company, right? Who right now is putting out 10 ads a day and paying $1 million for the workforce in order to put out the 10 ads a day. The idea that you could create 100 ads a day with 1/10 the workforce and actually see better results, higher margins, etc. Now all of a sudden the debate is, well, is that bad, right? Is that a bad thing? Can it, where efficiency in the craft that you talk about isn't necessarily as important. I could debate you on the craft thing too. We'll go into that in another chapter here.
Yeah.
But I think if we were to agree on that line in the sand of, hey, this is my craft, I want to do it, I think, you're talking about a small percentage with the majority of business who are looking to get content out there, summarize what they need to do, analyze investor decks, create investor, like these are types of things that we now see businesses being able to do at 10 times the speed at 1/10 the cost that have never been possible before, right? And we could go into a million examples about it, but I do think it is a very valid, line in the sand, I think, especially for your industry.
For me, it is a tool, and a lot of people don't know how to use that tool properly.
100%.
I would not class myself as an AI expert at all. I had a conversation with the CEO of a marketing company recently, and her business has been decimated in the last 6 months. And what she sees is that companies now think that AI can do what she and her team used to do, but it can't do it anywhere near to the same level. So, we're actually seeing this degradation. So she's lost all her clients. Well, she hasn't lost all her clients. She's lost some clients, and they now think that they can just do it themselves. And that's not going to be good for them in the long run because
they're doing
mediocre work.
Right. Well, and eventually, if they are truly doing mediocre work with AI, that's going to come back in the results, right? You are going to clearly see, that they made a poor decision that will automatically be reflected, obviously, in their results. I would say, and I would pick, and I come from 10 years of advertising. That was my first career. I worked in advertising agencies of all sizes, all shapes. And I do worry about that business model, right? Because, and we could go deeper into this. But a lot of traditional marketing agencies, payroll and the work that they do is tasks that I believe can be completely replaced very easily, right? But there is still an art, there is still a craft, especially to creativity and marketing and those types of things, that those are probably the small amount of jobs that probably are safe for the time being, the ones who can come up with those unique ideas. But if you look at a traditional marketing agency model right now, and you look at kind of how they're billing, I mean, it is a hard business to be in.
I have two as you guys were talking, I sort of got two pieces. First of all, Carter, how much do you think that what Jet is talking about, which is it's so easy to spot AI generated content, is caused by the fact that it's easy to spot generate AI generated content, or it's easy to spot bad AI generated content by people who don't know how to use it properly? And having gone through the course, I do have some opinions on it. But I wonder what will be yours.
Yeah,
Let's start with that.
here's the thing is that when you're spotting AI content, it's AI content that has been properly architected, is my opinion, right? These are individuals who, throw a couple articles in the blender, shake it up a little bit, copy and paste it away and call it good, right? And that's the content that you're seeing. Now, we teach and we talk a lot about, and this has showed up in statistics, there's a very small percentage, under 1% of people who use AI are actually using the paid models and actually doing it
Yeah.
strategically, right?
Hmm.
Most people aren't doing that. It's my belief that, when you actually can program and learn to use this as a co-pilot, it can publish things that you probably aren't seeing as AI generated content. It can learn your tones, it can learn your voice,
Yep.
it'll learn your style, right? But I think right now, and to your point, there's a small percentage of companies, a small percentage of people who are actually using it to get ahead today. Those are the people who actually know how to use it. They aren't just handing a ChatGPT account to some random, marketing leader or executive or intern and saying, go post 73 articles in the next 10 minutes, right? They're thinking more about it. They're building the systems underground in order to ensure that output is of quality.
Yeah, yeah. And I may have given everyone the impression that I'm a sort of, a black hat thinker on AI. So I'll take my black hat off and I'll put my
I
yellow
love it,
sunny
Jed.
hat on.
No, it's all
And
good.
because AI is useful. Let's I'm sort of slightly contradictory from what I was saying, but it needs to be supervised. It needs to be managed, and you need to put the right processes and guardrails in place if you're going to use that. And and a lot of it is as simple as, you can get AI to generate something, and it will sound like AI. In the next prompt, if you say, this sounds like AI, make it sound like it is coming from my voice, it comes back perfectly phrased as I would have written it, or as I would have said it. So it's absolutely capable. You just got to use it correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would even push that analogy and further. Sorry, Milana, cut you off, but one of the things, if we stick to this example, is you just talked about kind of a two prompt response,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Hit me, do it again. Now, what we're seeing is people who actually know how to use these things are saying, okay, that's fine, but that's only 10% of what I'm actually going to do. Instead of looking at 6 different resources in order to form my opinion, I'm going to look at 60. Instead of looking at, only 3 months of consumer data, I'm going to look at 3 years, right? And this idea of actually using AI appropriately should be not only matching what you would put out from a human perspective, but should actually be supercharging it, because now, as a content creator, an author, whoever you might be, has tools and things that would never have been possible with the time that's usually allotted for it, right? And so I would say that yes, the pendulum can swing back to standard, right, of just as good as if I would. But what we're seeing and what we see within our students is that when you continue to swing that pendulum, you actually now are going to be able to create much better content, much better output, because of the tools and the tactics that
Hmm.
you're using with the new AI technology.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
Hmm.
in the value card, we're talking about this, and what you're talking about is basically the supercharged access to knowledge,
Correct.
right? It's like it's not like I spent less time writing, but I can spend significantly less time researching, or to get the foundation for the writing for that creative part. And that goes back to your marketing agency concept, and that is that the one thing that um, remains of value is the taste, right? Is the human touch on what is good and what isn't, even if it's just using in the quality assurance capacity. But that's the one thing that AI is not doing that well yet, right? And I think that is a big question of how much it's creeping into that area. I think there was an article on basically that the taste and then the artistic creativity is the safe from AI area of human activity, right? But what is not is the um, intelligence parts, because suddenly knowledge and intelligence can be outsourced, right? Because it has access to everything that, I don't have to read 3,000 books. I can just, get that piece and get to that rational uh, background, if you will, or foundation of whatever it is I'm trying to do. But it's still up on me to figure out a way of to deliver it best, how to make it resonate with people, how to invoke the right emotions and whatever it is, which is, more on the art side of things.
Correct. Yeah,
Does it
100%.
resonate? Like,
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, I'm thinking of a very specific persona. There are some creatives that I've had the privilege of working with in the past, and they're just at a different level. I think we've all worked with individuals like this in the past that just think differently, right? And they have this creative firepower. Now, I think that is safe. However, at the same time, those individuals who can understand the situation, use AI in order to inform those ideas is what's going to differentiate them, right? So an AI powered creative, not to come up with the big idea for the big campaign or whatever, but those individuals should have access to all the intelligence they need. They're not going to need a strategy team in order to showcase all of the consumer data that they spent 6 months acquiring. Like, these things are at the tip of, at the tip of their fingers to be able to use and actually create ideas off of. And I do think, well, it brings up we're touching on a lot of marketing here, and it's just, that's my background. I could talk a little bit more about it, but, the reality is that, I would say a good majority of marketing is pretty bad, right? It is just over the plate, here's what it is, here's what it gives you, here's the price, go buy it, right? There's a
But you
very
don't know which
few,
bit is bad. Yeah. We don't know
yeah,
which
yeah,
half is
it's
bad.
50%. Yeah, right. Half of it doesn't work, but you can't tell what half. And I think that's where we're seeing AI just completely destroy. And Jed, you brought that up. It's just like I can automate those ads all day, right? I can actually probably make those even better because I can target them more closely. It's really kind of the cream on top, right? That is the big 30-second Super Bowl ads or whatever it might be. That is kind of what that is. But the vast majority of marketing, what I'm seeing across the board, especially when you kind of have that, yeah, we just need some ads for this new widget, right? Like that still is, that's incredibly, it's very easy to automate, I would say.
So,
can we step away from marketing? Can
Yes,
you?
let's do, please.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Let's talk briefly about sort of other areas of business that our CEOs might not be thinking about, where AI, because this is the content creation is what people see and what people blame AI for the most. But I think that it's not even tip of the iceberg. It's it's the dust on the top of the snow on top of the iceberg,
Right,
right? It's
exactly.
very, very little. The true value, as you're saying, is about how are we empowering people in our front line. So tell us about other parts of business when you see the biggest impact.
For sure. So we actually structure our curriculum around this, and Milan, this well. But what we have done is, over the course of the time we've been in business, we've taught over 1,500 different businesses how to do this. And what we see is we split it up into, obviously, you have marketing, but then you have leadership, finance, operations, and HR, right? We kind of go across the entire business. And what we've done is we've identified some of the biggest problems that those departments have, right? And these are generally universal, right? Regardless of where you are, you touch some of these types of things. And what we teach is how do you use AI on the front lines in order to compact or eliminate those problems altogether, right? Sales is the most important one. I forgot about that, right? So you think about across all of those, and what we've identified as the biggest problems and the easiest solutions to implement to get the biggest return on investment as quickly as possible from that type of implementation. And so, Milan, we could pick on sales for a second, right? Sales is a huge one, and that's actually our second most popular module next to marketing. But when we think about sales, most people come in and say either two things, right? I'm not in sales, which is completely wrong. Everyone's in sales, right? Everyone's selling their company, especially at the C-suite and executive level, as the audience knows, right? And the second thing is sales is about relationships. AI will never replace that, right? And those are two of the biggest detractor comments that we see when we're coming into those classes. And I already debunked one of them. Everyone's in sales. Everyone can learn from being a salesperson. The second one is, yes, sales is about relationships. But if you were to look at the amount of time your sales team is actually spending on relationships, you realize that the amount of admin work they are doing in order to maintain those relationships is far outweighing the actual time that they're in front of a client or a prospect. And that's where we really dive in to say, imagine if your sales team wasn't sitting in their office for 6 hours a day, following up with leads, entering the CRM, learning about the person they're about to go play golf with, right? Like, imagine if we were to compact that so that 6 hours a day, they're not in the office, they're actually out doing the relationship things that move the needle that they are very good at, right? And that's really when we look at those departments, we're not trying to eliminate the relationships. What we're trying to do is to say, what is the zone of genius for that person, right? A good salesperson, their genius is talking face to face and closing the deal. Depending on the business, that might be a little different, right? Their zone of genius is not filling out Salesforce, right? Their zone of genius is not, uh, you know, researching a prospect company to see if it's worth the time for a meeting. And that's what we attack, and that's what we can compress really in an incredible way using the tools and AI in general.
AI is often a really good choice of a who.
Correct.
If you've read Who Not How, AI is one of those who's that you can start delegating work to, delegating tasks to. And Milan, you've got an exact card on this topic itself, haven't you?
I just wanted to say that where we are today, that should be the first question you ask before you
Indeed,
ask
yeah.
who is. Should it be who or AI, or what if the who is AI for this particular question, task, or whatever it is? Yeah.
And there's a real opportunity there as well, isn't there? Because I know a lot of people, once they realize that, they will find it easier to delegate to AI than they will to delegate to a human, because delegating to a human involves personal interactions, and not everyone is good at delegating. But if you can decide what you want to delegate and then put the processes in place and the guide rails in place, then that's then useful. As long as what you're getting back is the good product.
100%. Yeah, and I think this brings up a great topic, right? When you think about the who, right, you start to understand the delegation side, but this actually goes down to, from an executive point of view, why it is so important as executives to understand the capabilities of what's possible today in such depth, right? Because when you're sitting at top of your company and trying to figure out, hey, we need to find a home for this task. Is that hiring 3 new people, or is there a way that we can delegate those tasks to something that, is different, to AI specifically, right? And if you don't know those capabilities, if your leaders don't know the capabilities of what's possible, which changes what seems to be every 3 days right now,
Yeah.
you're going to be stuck in a traditional way of offloading those tasks. You're going to be stuck in a traditional way of hiring those 6 new people. And you know what? I'm not here to say don't hire anyone, but when you think about the who versus the how, you could start to actually understand it. You need to understand this new quote unquote workforce that you brought to life here to say, actually, let's find a system, let's find a tool, let's find a process that AI can actually run for us that's going to take care of that for us. But you have no idea how to make that decision unless you actually know what the capabilities are used for, or what's possible with them.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. Things are moving so fast that it's difficult to keep up. So I've spoken to a few people, and they, their perspective is, well, even if I dived in right now, anything I learned would be out of date in 3 months' time. So I'm just not gonna do it. And that to me is a short-sighted view, because that just means you're now a Luddite, and you're gonna fall way behind, way behind anyone else. But what would you say to a CEO that has that perspective? It moves so fast, I can't keep up. What would you say to them, and where could they go to actually keep up to date easily and quickly?
100%. Yeah. So I think if you were to look at your LinkedIn feed, Jed, you've brought this up, or, scroll TechCrunch or whatever, you're going to see every new bell and whistle that comes out. And I'm sure you're being served across every media channel how some business, 100x their output and fired everyone. You're going to see all of these things, right, that are actually distracting from what the core is, right? And when we start to understand what the core is, Milan, you know this firsthand from coming through the class, there's a new thing that's introduced every day, right? There's a new capability. Some of those capabilities are truly transformational. Like some things just came out in these last couple of weeks that truly do change kind of how we think about the delegation, how the types of tasks we can delegate to that who. But most of it is actually noise. Now, what I always tell executives is just start having conversations with AI day to day. Every time you come up across a new task, ask the AI system, how could you help me accomplish this, right? How can AI help me with this task? Now, you're going to come to the same things where it's just a dead end, right? Like, you know what? I can't help you with that. But more and more and more, even just using the systems to reflect on each problem you have throughout the day is going to increase the opportunity. You don't need to know about the newest model, right? You don't need to know about whatever feud Anthropic is having with who. Like, don't worry about the bells, the whistles, the fluff. Think about AI is so accessible. You don't need to sign up for some massive program. Pay the $20 a month, jump into the system, and just start working with it. Take every task you have to it. So I think that is the biggest piece of advice we say is you just have to start, right? Don't worry about the hype, right? And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. Mm.
And the fact is that, yes, if you start today, you have a little bit of an advantage over people who tried 3 years ago when AI wasn't quite there yet.
Right.
Sorry, Jet. Right. But, what we're suggesting in the how card is to, hitch your wagon to somebody who's already doing the trailblazing for you and try to keep up that way, right? Which is what, companies like yours are doing. Helped me tremendously. My journey is different. Look, I come from technical background. I was a data consultant in previous life, and founder. And I have been always surrounded by some really, really smart people. My co-founders in Kabul are just fantastic trailblazers in their own right. I could never keep up with them, right? But I didn't. Right? They are building their own things, and the company is doing amazing stuff in the AI space. I went a different route, and I'm a little bit of a late adopter, and I felt last year that, okay, we are finally there at a point where this actually makes a massive, and it's interesting that it was just about 6 months after you started your
Yeah,
company,
right.
or Callan like to give credit where it is. And then that accelerated my progress very, very quickly. I don't think I would be much further today if I did all that work myself for the 3 years, as many people in the Trailblazers did themselves, unless I would dedicate 60 hours a week to it like you do, which again, I actually have another job. So.
Right, exactly. Well, I was gonna say, to what Milan brings up, and I'd love for the audience to come check us out. It's theuncommonbusiness.co. We have programs for absolutely everyone. But one of the reasons I bring that up is, Milan, you brought it up perfectly. You also have a day job. Executives are incredibly busy. Everyone is running their own company. And I have the luxury of spending my 60 hours a week, whatever it might be, researching, playing with the things that look like hype but could be impactful, and being able to transfer that to the leaders who are in our program. And I think that's the most important thing. Milan, you could have spent 100 hours a week on YouTube University trying to track down the hype, etc. Part of our program is that as our client, our job is to distill what we believe is important and what is directly transferable into your business that's going to give you an unfair advantage, right? And that is our job, right? And that's why people come to our class. That's why people come here, because you're busy, right? You don't have time to try to keep up with everything. Let us give you the 3 things this week that you have to go do that's actually going to go move the needle. And I would encourage, whether it's with us or whatever program you want to go with, I think it's really important, especially for your executive audience. You aren't going to have time in the day to just try to watch YouTube videos and hope for the best, right? You have to tie yourself to whether it's a really great employee through a program like ours in order to figure out what are those opportunities and how are you actually going to move the needle, because that's going to be your quickest way to return. And let me tell you, the return is absolutely immense. We look to always drive a 10x return for every dollar anyone spends with us in their business and in their life. And that's just kind of the level we hold ourselves to. And I believe that we do that day in and day out. And I just think that's what's possible in this new world.
I think that one has to adopt a new understanding of return on investment when it comes to these things, right? People have tendency to looking at it's almost like the opportunity cost of not doing that is so huge, because the one thing from my own experience, like things that I wouldn't even think of doing, 6 months ago, right? Because I would be, okay, I have to hire somebody, I have to explain it to them, I have to do all this prep work or something like that. Become a let's play on Sunday morning with coffee, right?
Yep.
It's
100%.
ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And switching the brain into the thinking and say, instead of figuring out whether something is possible or not, just freaking try and see where it takes you, right?
Yeah, and we live in an incredible world where those trials often end in great successful one, as you know, right? It's this idea of taking a complex problem and bringing it to the system often results in some really great, really great things. And I think that, one more point, not to open a can of worms, but when you think about companies, if you think about companies in your industry, what we see is we see a widening gap between people and teams who are adopting these types of things and people and teams who are not. Now, it used to be this party trick. It used to be, oh, the intern's doing it over here, etc. But when you're able to get 10x the output from a team that was the same size as it was 6 months ago, the competitors are going to start to notice. The differentiation is going to start to widen. And I think, companies who adopt this today, regardless of your size, regardless of whatever, you're going to see a lot more competition at the table coming up a lot quicker because these tools allow you to accelerate at a speed we've never seen before.
And Kazi, you mentioned, the hype over the last few weeks, and I think I know what you're alluding to. But if a CEO felt the need to go out and buy, an M4 and M5 Mac Mini and install OpenClaw, should they do that?
If you were to ask me a week and a half ago, I would say, yeah, go for it. The reality is, again, this world is changing so fast.
Yeah.
I have two Mac Minis sitting right here that we're running OpenClaw 2 weeks ago, right? And that's the system. And for those listening, OpenClaw is kind of a dedicated AI agent that's always there, always running. One of the beauties of this world is that there's so much capital flowing into these markets that whenever something comes up, usually something better comes and leapfrogs it about 10 days from that. And Anthropic actually came out with a system that is absolutely incredible. Same functionality as OpenClaw in terms of what a CEO would normally use it for, right? Actual tasks I would recommend to the students and the leaders that we work with. And it's included in the $25 a month program, and it's a lot safer. So it's called Claude Cowork. And if you were to choose one platform today, I would say go Claude all the way in, download Cowork, and you'll be off to the races.
Let's ask you again in 2 weeks. I was really trying to, keep this content as evergreen as it's humanly possible in this space. So you just timestamped the whole bloody thing. So thank you for that.
It's a moment in time. It's a moment in time.
It's a moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's enter the danger. You have two CEO coaches in front of you here, right? And I saw in your courses building coach brains, right? Be hard on us. Jet, let's brace ourselves for what's coming. What do you see the impact on us, on our industry? You were talking about inside of the company, right? Operations, everything like that. You have a section on leadership, right? And you do have a concept of a leadership coach. What are your thoughts on that? Are we a dying breed?
Well, I would actually go back to how Jed opened this whole thing, right? About, his line in the sand regarding, even content. I do really think, that when you think about what coaches do, right? What you guys do working with your clients, working with them, that you guys are going to continually to be more important, right? Now, I think there is an opportunity for you to become more impactful, smarter at the business, that you walk into. You're going to be able to understand the situation in much better ways than you ever were before. And there's probably a responsibility for your industry to pick that up, because if you're not, other coaches are. It kind of goes back to my earlier example. If you could walk in to a business that had 100 employees and know every single trend of every single employee survey matched with their P&L and tailor your coaching and your advice and your mentorship and whatever you're doing with them in such a more tailored way, that's what's going to be expected. Now, I still believe, do I think that a system is going to completely replace coaching? I don't. I do think it's going to potentially replace aspects of your role. We teach a lot about how to replicate your brain, like replicate your coach's brain, like Milan said. And you know what? They're pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So I do think that the normal Tuesday morning phone call from a CEO in your industry might not always happen like that, right? They might actually go to a system that knows your frameworks, that knows your advice, and can tailor its feedback based on the specific situation. But I do think, kind of back to that creative, there is a still of that very small layer on top that coaches, I think, embody when done correctly. I do think that, the average coaches who aren't you two, you guys are the cream of the crop, are probably going to fall off, because if you're giving vanilla advice, if you're bringing vanilla products to the table, those can be easily replaced, just like a vanilla ad could, right? But when you're thinking about your experience, yes, parts of it can be duplicated in different systems. But I do think that when you think about that top 10%, top 1%, you two both fit in there, right? But those are the coaches that are going to be sought after, especially if they're AI powered.
Yeah. I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I've spent 2 years building out my AI coach brain, and to the point where I can now interrogate my own AI engine, my own AI
Yep.
bot, and it can produce content very much like I would write, in my voice, in my tone. I can
100%.
even get it to generate the audio file and the video file directly from the script.
It's
Now,
great.
the irony is I don't do that because I actually quite like the videoing. I
Yeah.
quite like being in front of a camera. So that just keeps that authenticity still there. Because again, if you are an AI bot on video, you can normally tell. You can normally tell. I mean, if it's a generic character, you wouldn't be able to tell. But if they're trying to replicate someone, it's still not quite there. Still not quite there.
Yep, 100%. It is not quite
Mm,
there, especially with video, but we're only a matter of time away from it, right? But I think,
absolutely. Mm,
but I think that embodies it perfectly, Jed, is, you can be AI powered and you can probably reach a lot more people. But if you think about the coaching industry in general, I don't see a time where CEO, like, they might ask you to do less things, right? They might focus on, an engagement a quarter versus an engagement a week, right? But that engagement a quarter is going to be that much more quality, right? It's going to be have that much more insight fueling it.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad you didn't kill my career prospects here. So, my thinking on that is, and I'm making this joke with my personal trainer. You might not see it, but I do actually go to the gym every now and then, thanks to this guy, because the conversation always is, 20% of what I'm paying you is to tell me what to do, because I could find that information myself if I really wanted to.
Yep.
But 80% of what I'm paying you for is so I show up. And I think that that's what AI is not going to do. It's not going to make you show up unless you're willing to. And I think that the accountability, the commitment part of it is really, really important. As AI powered coach, which is what I would like to see myself as, I see going into places with clients that I wouldn't be able to a year ago, right? As in, because some of the parts of the job became partially automated, or again, let's do a survey, let's get through this, let's get this through quickly. I can now do it for a client and then have that call of the interpretation without having to have the call of the having to spend day before, sifting through data and doing something like that. I could do it in 15 minutes before the call and be as ready and as valuable to the client, but with significantly less effort on my part, time-wise, which allows me to provide higher quality, go into better questions, do more for any given client, which is the way I'm seeing it. And again, we'll see. If AI is good enough for you as a leader, you probably didn't need a coach anyway. You probably could have done the same thing just reading books before, because
Right.
getting to knowledge and figuring out what to do is probably not your problem.
Yep.
Something else is going on. It will be a while before AI will listen to the tone of your voice and see your body language and pick up on the little pieces of information, because right now it only knows what you tell it.
Correct.
Yeah. Can you foresee a day where there is an AI coach facing a leadership team session, and the AI coach has the nuance, the subtlety to say, what's going on? Yes, there's something that someone is not raising. What's happened? What's happened? And having the emotional intelligence to let the silence hang to the point where someone then says, I've got a beef with him. Yeah. AI is a long way off from being able to pick up that. And that is a lot of what we do. I mean, it's picking up those subtleties, those nuances that are very difficult to detect. And sometimes you can't even pick it up if you're running a virtual session. You have to be
Correct.
in the
Yeah,
room.
you have to be in the rooms. Yeah.
So from that perspective, we're safe for a while. I actually do believe that coaches will disappear, but it's probably not for another 50 years or so. But then we'll be in some sort of, technology dystopian world where everything is just done by computers, and maybe we're all sitting on the beach drinking pina coladas. But if so, who's actually making the money? I don't know.
Right. It's a whole nother talk show, Jen.
What money? What is money? Sorry.
That's right. Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's another episode.
No, absolutely. The psychology element of what we do is really strong, and I am short-term pessimistic, long-term optimistic. I think that AI is going to get there, but I think that it's not that coaches, as we feel and as we know it today, are going to be replaced by AI. I think that the society is going to change so dramatically that that paradigm will shift so much that within that, just read a couple of Ian Banks novels and tell me if you see a personal coach in there anywhere. If you're in poor scarcity society, then what the hell happens, right? What are we going to actually do? We'll probably still have Pilates coaches, but who knows?
Yeah, I think they're safe.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Carter, thank you so very much for being here with us. Again, for the listeners, if you want to hitch your AI wagon to somebody who's really trailblazing for you, check out the Uncommon Business. I can highly recommend it as a, consider this your Google review. Sorry, I'm really
appreciate that, Milan. Yes, you're a star student. I love it.
An endorsement, and and hopefully, we'll check in with you in a couple of hours to see what's new in the world of AI.
Yeah,
I'm not sleeping much these days, and I don't think it's slowing down at all. So this is kind of the world we're in.
I can only imagine. And just to go back a little to what you said, 2 weeks ago, we had a conversation about OpenClaw and the implications, right? And today it's like, it's kind of a dead tree. That branch on the evolution tree already. Like, it's great for some things, and but again, it's just the concept, and somebody is going to do a better version of it pretty damn quickly. So get on the wagon and get moving. Otherwise, you will be left behind as an organization and as a leader. It's unfortunate, fortunate or unfortunate. Take your way. It's the reality we live in 2026 and beyond. So thank you again so much.